from my experience, what I've seen a lot of, I'm loath to use this word, procrastination. I don't think it's procrastination. I think it's hesitation. And that hesitation, I think, is born out of fear. Fear, first of all, that maybe this is the first time you've ever done it, or maybe it's not and you've been rejected before. One of the best pieces of advice that I ever got was that, you know what, Margo, it's kind of like there'll be lots of people putting in proposals. So if you don't get it, don't feel like a big failure because you didn't get it. And that is, I think that's a fear that a lot of us carry. So it's kind of harnessing your fear. And I think in harnessing your fear, you look for the supports around you that can help you. One of the most important things, I think, is just get some words on paper. You know, oftentimes I just spew out garbage, man. I just type because I know once I get going and my thoughts will become clearer. So my advice to students is it doesn't matter how bad it is. And you know what? If it gets really bad, write me a letter. Yeah, I see a lot of challenges for students just getting started, right? For all the reasons that I've just talked about. The write me a letter piece or write a journal really helps. I've had people do that.
Well, I mean, you have to be self-confident, right? And I didn't, when I was a grad student, I lacked confidence. Mm-hmm. So I felt that I wouldn't be successful, so I didn't bother trying. And then that became like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because when I did try once and I wasn't successful, I said, well, I knew that was going to happen, type of thing. And but the people who do, now that I know how the system works, the people that are confident and keep applying, and they are able to accept, you know, constructive criticism and reapply, will ultimately be successful.
I find that even now when I write, sometimes when I read students' writings, we have a tendency as writers, I think, to jump. It's like we're deer. You know, we jump from one spot to a big leap to a next spot. And it's really important for a reader to sort of have that pathway on the ground. And it's sort of like leading them down the pathway. So when writing a proposal for funding and you're proposing an idea, it's really important to lead the reader along through your thought so that they're like walking beside you as you're explaining this, and then they come to your idea, if you will, or you might have said it right at the onset, however you choose. But once they get there, they say, yeah, got that. So you really want to give them that sort of enough information to lead them through your thinking and to why it's so important. And you want them that funder to say, yeah, this totally makes sense to me. And yeah, I understand why it's important, right? One of the things that I always look for in proposals when I'm reviewing them, and actually I hold myself accountable to this as well when I apply for funding. Is it straightforward, and does it look really sort of simple, straightforward? That's what I'm always looking for. We can have extraordinarily complex ideas, but they don't have to be buried in 5-syllable words. They can be said with very simple language, but the complexity of the idea is there. And I think it makes it even more powerful when we can write in that manner. So I'm looking for innovation. I look for uniqueness. I look for level of thought, critical thinking in a proposal that the content demonstrates that kind of thought. But I look for the simplicity. I look for, does it just walk me through? Does it hold my hand and walk me from the first page to the last page, and I know exactly where I'm going and how I'm getting there all the time. Yeah, when you have other people to read your writing before you submit it and they give you advice, like, it can only make things better. Like, I always say to everybody I talk to, an editor is my very best friend. Love editors, because they help me to really shine and help those ideas to come through in the way that they were intended to do.
I think probably the most common mistake that I mean, they don't proofread intensely enough. I mean, I can't express strongly enough that reviewers get annoyed when they see typos, poor grammar, because it looks like the student hasn't really given it their all, right? They haven't really been careful. The advice I would give to myself now would be to find good academic mentors. So if your supervisor isn't strong in grant writing, find someone who is, because it's an important start in your research career, right? If you start to get funding early on, two things happen. It builds your confidence for writing grants. And secondly, what most people don't know is among reviewers who are like reading your grants, the more money other people have given you, the more likely they are to give you money, right? So find people who will help you put your ideas on paper in a way that reviewers will respond positively to.
I remember when I applied for my first funding, it seemed really daunting. I didn't have a sense of the parameters of what they would be asking me for. And I think having someone to call or to talk to that's been through the process is really important, because they can kind of answer those sort of basic questions that when you're brand new to it, you really don't know because you don't have the experience.
One of the most common errors students make is they spend a lot of time demonstrating that they know the literature, when in fact the literature review is really intended just to give the reviewer enough context, information that they understand what it is you're doing, right? They don't need to know everything there is to know about the topic. So you have to be really strategic in terms of what you include in your lit review. So it needs to be the smaller part. What needs to be have the most presence is your methodology. So this is usually you're writing a grant to get funded to do research, right? Whether it's a scholarship or what, they're funding you as an individual, but they're also funding your idea about research, what you're going to do. And so that's where you need to be actually quite methodical. And so the most common mistakes is students flip those things around because they're not used to doing they're not used to doing research. So they don't put as much effort into it. And that's why it's really important to have a mentor who can help you do that. Really focus on that methodology chapter. And that includes, what are you going to do to make meaning of this? Whether you call it analysis or meaning making, you need to know what you're going to do with this information, how you're going to make it amenable to sharing and for it to be beneficial and useful to other people. But what I look for is something that is not only a great idea, because there are lots of great ideas, but people are funded because their great ideas are feasible, because the reviewer sees not only that the idea is great and that there's a need for it, but that the student can actually get it done in the time they've said, and the reviewer understands how it is they're actually going to do it.
So the idea might be 25% of the criteria. It has to be a good idea, and good ideas get attention. So ideas are great. That's good. But I would say the rest is equally split between the feasibility of it, like is it doable within a reasonable time frame? You know, like of the student, how much time do they want to spend doing it? 2 years for a master's, 5 years for a PhD, something like that. And is it, the second thing is the environment, like is it a supportive environment? So some projects are different, you know, they're very different. If it's a land-based project, you know, looking at camps for mental health that are, you know, the question would be, is this environment safe? Is it appropriate? Do you have the necessary supports to do the research in that environment? If it was a lab-based project looking at genetics or something, or, you know, or microbiology or something like that, water quality, you know, using a lab science, would that, you'd have to assess, well, does this person have access to the lab and the equipment and the supervision, you know, to be able to, you know, conduct the research that they want to do. So the environment is different across every project, but a supportive environment is a really important factor for success, because, and that includes human environment, like, you know, supervision from senior grad students. Everybody is a success to make it to where they are, but unfortunately not everybody can be funded.